It feels like we've been waiting for this Dune sequel for a lot longer than we actually have been, largely due to just how much we've been anticipating it. And of course, it getting delayed from its original October release date due to Hollywood throwing a hissy fit and going on strike didn't help the matter. Over the years, and thanks to learning a lot more about the world of Dune and the books, we've come to really appreciate the first film in the series. There's a lot more to it than what you see on the surface. Videos like the one you see on screen now, which is linked down in the description below, do an excellent job of breaking down everything the movie touched on, but which the average person will miss entirely. And with that level of subtlety and depth in the first film, it left us wondering what new themes and ideas the second movie might leave buried just beneath the surface of the sand dunes for people to uncover. Well, now Dune Part 2 is finally here, and the wait is over. So does this sequel follow that same narrative structure as the first film? Does it live up to the lofty expectations? Does it even live up to its predecessor? Well, we'll answer all that and more after we get in a quick recap of the story of Dune Part 2. So, here's your warning. Spoilers ahead. Dune Part 2 picks up after Paul Atreides and his mother Jessica have spent some time in the sand dunes with the Fremen, and they've been learning the ways of the desert and trying to earn the respect of the Sand People, in addition to simply surviving the conditions as well as the Harkonnen soldiers who hunt them. Whispers around the Siege have begun to herald Paul as the Lazan Gaib, a prophet who is destined to lead the Fremen to paradise and restore Arrakis to the way it was before outsiders arrived. But the vast majority of the Fremen are blinded by their fanaticism and fail to see that Paul's mother Jessica and the other Bene Gesserit have manipulated events, prophecies, and the Fremen people into expecting this prophet, an individual that the Bene Gesserit would then introduce in order to take control of the Fremen. Jessica is chosen to become the new regent mother, and she endures a grueling bout of poisoning, but one that she has prepared for. For his part, Paul goes full native and welcomes every test the Fremen throw at him in order to prove that he is worthy of being Fremen. This all culminates with him learning how to ride the massive sandworms that scour the planet. Then he catches an even better ride when he bangs Zendaya. Meanwhile, Paul and the Fremen have been making life hell for the Harkonnens on Arrakis, bringing their spice production to a halt and forcing the Baron Harkonnen to place his nephew Feyd-Rautha in charge of the planet. After leaning into the supposed prophecy and alienating Zendaya, Paul's mind has become fully awakened after drinking the poison of the sandworm. This immediately turns him into a massive dickhead, but everyone still hails him as their Lazan Gaib, their Mahdi, their chosen one who was prophesized. Also, he can now see all possible futures and devises a way that the Fremen can take back their planet, and it would give Paul the opportunity to take revenge on the Harkonnens and the Emperor at the same time. So Paul sends a letter to bait the Emperor into coming to Arrakis, and he takes the bait, but he doesn't come alone. He arrives and sets up shop in a massive makeshift pyramid surrounded by his huge Sardaukar army. Some of the Sand People lead a diversion that allows Paul and some warriors to slip into the throne room as an epic battle rages outside. Here he finds the Baron Harkonnen cowering on the steps of the throne. Through a twist revelation, the Baron Harkonnen is actually Paul's maternal grandfather, and Paul greets him with a blade through the neck. Then he takes the Emperor and his retinue hostage. Eventually, Paul fights Feyd-Rautha, the up-and-coming Harkonnen warrior who stands as the Emperor's champion, and Paul just barely finds a way to defeat him. He then orders the Emperor to kiss the ring, bitch, and takes the Emperor's daughter as his wife, much to the chagrin of Zendaya. With the other great houses rejecting Paul's new claim to the throne, a holy war is on the horizon, and the movie comes to an end. And obviously, this recap is leaving out a ton of details and subplots and such, but it's a 3-hour movie, give me a break. And with that, we've reached that point in the video where we have to decide if Dune Part 2 was a great watch or a hate watch. And it's easily earned a great watch rating in our book. We really liked the first Dune movie from Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve.
And came to love it after getting more acquainted with the books and realizing what an impressive feat Villeneuve had managed to not only pull off, but to do so with flourish. We really liked Part 2 a lot as well, but for entirely different reasons. While the first movie was smart, subtle, and very intentional with everything it presented to us, Part 2 is much more in-your-face and bombastic with its story. It doesn't leave as much information up for debate, giving the audience an extremely clear picture of what is happening and why. And don't take that with any kind of negative connotation. That style definitely worked for this movie, and it plays especially well when paired with the more methodical first entry to the series. The point I want to make is that Dune Part 1 and Part 2 are very different kinds of movies, and to make both of them work in their own right is quite an impressive accomplishment, and it makes the prospect of the inevitable third and final movie that much more tantalizing. Epic is the best word that comes to mind when thinking about Dune Part 2. Not simply like, oh, it was so epic, bro, but as in an epic. Everything about the story took place on this massive scale while the fate of the galaxy was being decided. The whole thing was a visual treat with indulgent sweeping shots, and we followed complex, heroic characters as they realized their destinies. It's the type of epic movie that we truly haven't experienced for a while. Dune certainly has its own very unique feel to it. It doesn't feel like it could be confused with any other sci-fi or fantasy setting, and this movie does an excellent job in realizing and emphasizing that unique feel. And it's just nice to get a big budget film that feels and looks like a big budget film. It feels like it's been a long time since the studio got their money's worth in that regard. The movie intentionally built things up very slowly as it unveiled all the methods and motivations behind every character's machinations. Everyone seems to be playing some angle, so there's a lot of explanation necessary, especially when the first movie was perhaps too subtle to get some of these points across. But Part 2 was very thorough in letting us know everything that was going on, and usually in an interesting manner, preventing the movie from feeling like reading a textbook. It was on the verge of being a bit too plotting just before it reached its eventual fever pitch, but then the explosive finish kicked off with a bang. Largely because of how long the buildup was, the final battle of this movie is epic, and there's that word again. It was a fully pitched battle that the Fremen brought to the doorstep of the Sardaukar, of the Harkonnens, and of the Emperor himself. The Fremen summoned in their massive worms from the north, materialized out of the sand in the south, and ferociously attacked the Imperial forces, allowing Paul and his soldiers to slip inside and confront the Emperor. But the scale of the battle that raged outside was massive, truly epic in every sense of the word. And perhaps an underrated aspect of it was that it was all fought out on a clear sunny day. There was no fog, no cover of darkness, and therefore no excuse for the creators to reduce the scale and quality and cheap out on the CGI and effects costs, which is an all too common trick some people pull. There was nowhere to hide in this battle, and it left us with a visual feast when it came to this climactic conflict. You really felt the weight of two huge armies coming together and crossing blades. And with this gripping escalation of events, any concerns about the pace of the movie up to this point quickly faded away. It wasn't all perfect. The movie would have benefited from showing us a lot more of the pitched battle that went on outside the Emperor's pyramid. And beyond just the final confrontation, we also would have benefited from seeing more of Paul's vague visions once he had gained clarity of sight. Stilgar seems a little goofier than he really should be at times, but it's a minor nitpick that comes down to personal taste anyway. And there's not a whole lot more to criticize here, and certainly no major issues with the movie, outside of perhaps the pacing, but even that is limited to short stretches of the film, and is completely forgotten by the time the next plot development comes. The movie actually strived to inject quite a few moments of levity and humor throughout, at least more than we would have anticipated, and it's not bad when it lands, but it doesn't land every time. Something that was unintentionally funny was that this movie pretty much turned Paul's mother Jessica into Emperor Palpatine. Complete with a hooded ensemble and a newly disfigured face following a near-death experience, she was shown to be a master manipulator behind the scenes, moving every piece on the board just as she had devised. When all the dust had settled, Paul was ascendant toward the Emperor's throne, and she sat atop Arrakis. She even had her own "do it" scene. The long and the short of it is that Denis Villeneuve delivered with Dune Part 2, adapting the supposedly unadaptable yet again, but this time turning Dune into a big screen epic in every sense of the word, and managing to do so with a very different style of film. The seemingly long wait for this sequel was worth it, and we think that Dune Part 2 is well worth your time and your money. Have you seen Dune Part 2 yet? What did you think of it if you did? Are you looking forward to the next film, Dune Messiah? Let us know in the comments below. As always, remember to like the video if you liked it, and click the subscribe button to stay tuned to HateWatchers for future reviews of TV shows and movies. Thank you for riding the worm with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.